Our particular corner of the podcast universe will cover all aspects of media fandom: film, television, stage, music, and other media sources. My name is Melody Clark. I'm a professional writer, a fan fiction writer, and now I will be your podcast Sherpa. Welcome to Flak. Joining us today for this week's Flak are two longtime Star Trek fans. We'll be talking about the past and future of Trek fan fiction and fanzines with Dr. Beth Singer, who's a fan writer, publisher, and an expert in medical nanotechnology. Also with us is a brilliant visual artist and legendary writer and publisher, the great Alayne Gelfand. For this week's Flak are two longtime Star Trek fans. And aren't we all? We'll be discussing the past and future of Trek fan fiction and fanzines with Dr. Beth Singer and my old friend Alayne Gelfand.
Not so much with the old.
Well, we'll say vintage.
Thank you. That's better.
Vintage friends. Okay. All right, let's go with the first questions always. How were you both drawn into Star Trek? And tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and how all of that happened.
You go first?
I can go first. My name is Dr. Beth. And I like to say that I was conceived during the second season of Star Trek. And my parents started watching Star Trek when it was on the air, and they were part of the letter writing campaign to bring it back. My mom was very active in going to conventions and buying fanzines. So I started growing up watching it. I don't really remember my first episode, probably watched it from when we were very young. And I started reading fan fiction because my mom had collections of fanzines. And I started, when I was a teenager, I asked her if I could borrow some of her fanzines, and she gave me some. And she gave me some of her Star Trek fanzines, which were Jen, and like one of the first ones that I read was let's see, don't tell the captain.
Don't tell it to the captain.
Don't tell it to the captain. One of the most hilarious fanzines, Star Trek fanzines and novels that there is. My so I basically got it from when I was little, and I've been watching it ever since. And I actually have I got into science, I think in part because I was into Star Trek, and I actually have a PhD in biochemistry from UCLA. And I do research in biochemistry. I work for a small biotech company. And we're doing creating radiation mitigators for radiation exposure. So that's fine.
I didn't really get into Star Trek until the reruns started showing in Los Angeles. My mother watched it, and I knew about it, but I was a little too young to stay up and watch it myself, and so I was not allowed to. But I would kind of sneak out, and I saw these interesting colors and guys, and I was kind of intrigued from an early age. But until around when I was 19, probably is when I started watching the reruns. And at the same time, I was going through some really bad health problems, and it was causing quite a bit of depression. And I saw this hopeful, bright, wonderful future ahead of me, and it just grabbed me, and it really pulled me out of my head, which wasn't a great place at the time. And I started writing fan fiction without having any clue that fandom or fan fiction or fanzines existed. So I like to say I created chaos, because that's what I started writing without even knowing it existed. And just kind of slid forward through that. I went to my first convention by myself at 19, which was in Houston. It was the Ultimate Fantasy, which has a whole long line of problems associated with it. But I met my friend Terry Ann Roderick there, and she introduced me to fanzines. And the weekend after that convention, she came from San Luis Obispo to Claremont California to give me an entire suitcase filled with classic KS mostly. And I was just in love. And that's the story of how I became a zine editor.
At relatively very early ages, both of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And really sort of taken into the fandom by nurturers.
Yeah, it was. In fact, Beth's mom, I knew her for several years before I ever met Beth because she bought zines from me. And so we kind of hooked up because of her mom.
No, I think you knew her a long time before.
A long time. I was
Yeah.
trying not to say how old I am.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I knew her mom for a long time.
See, my mom always had zines in the house, and I would borrow the zines. And so one of the problems that I wasn't really into Slash, and she was. So I would always try to find the zines that I really liked. And so I've always found things like Contacts and like Vault of Tomorrows and, you know, stuff like that. So I started reading them really early on. But I didn't really start writing until much later, because one of the other things I forgot to mention was I actually am married and have 3 kids. So not only was I getting my PhD, I was also having kids at the same time.
Oh, yeah. That is way too much to handle at one time.
I agree.
Yeah. So my it was difficult to write, to find time to write, and I still struggle to do that because I'm juggling constantly the needs of the kids and, you know, husband and my wants of being and doing stuff in fandom. So I didn't really start writing until maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15. I was in Stargate, and I talked to a friend of mine, Annie, from Ashton Press, and she was putting together a zine, and I wrote a story, and one of the stories that I wrote was a crossover between Big Bang Theory and Stargate. And
Beth writes funny stuff.
Yeah, I have kind of a twisted sense of humor. Let's just say.
I approve.
Yeah. So, and then I saw the movie Star Trek Beyond. Now, I'd always watched Star Trek, of course, but for the first time after I watched Star Trek Beyond, at first I went, of course, and scoured everything on AO3 and fanfiction.net and anywhere else I could find it, and hardly anybody was writing anything about the movie. And I just was like, I was dumbfounded because it was such a great movie. It's a great her comfort movie. Okay.
That's her thing.
That's my thing.
Her comfort.
My thing is her comfort, by the way. Spock specifically.
She's mean. She's mean.
I am very bad to Spock. So I scoured the internet trying to find stories, and I found very, very few. And then the few that started emerging weren't very good. So I started writing a missing scene, and that's all it was just a missing scene for Star Trek Beyond. And then it became, I kept adding things to it and expanding things to it, expanding things and adding things. And then I started reading some of it to Alayne, who was coming over to my house, and she was like laughing in all the right places. For example, I had gone to a scientific meeting with a couple of colleagues, and we were exploring the island of Hawaii in a rental car, and in our spare time. And so I was spending a great deal of time with these people that I knew really well, but we were like 10 hours in a car. And so we were talking about all sorts of things. So then I was like, well, what would Spock and McCoy talk about when they were trapped on this planet for, hours and hours and days. And so that's kind of how it evolved from there. And
it became a novel.
It became close to 50,000 words, and Ashton Press published it, and it was called Well, That's Just Typical. Only have to say it like this. Well, that's just typical. Because that's how Dr. McCoy would have said it.
Well, of course. We know exactly who it was before you said so.
Yes.
Now, is this still in print and available?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
I actually have some copies still left, and you can buy them directly from me. And Ashton Press keeps all her zines in publication. So she has a website. You can always go to her website and order from there.
Which
It's
is?
ashtonpress.net, I think.
Is it not that net?
Alayne's going to look it up.
Okay, we can check that out.
Yeah. So she actually does all the publishing because she's very good at it. She has a very long history of publishing zines. I think she's published over 100 or more in her publishing career.
Easily.
Easily.
Yes, it's .net.
It's ashtonpress.net. And so you can go ahead and order zines from her. She's and she'll print them out and send them to you. If you order them from me, they'll be signed by me, Dr. Beth, and I can personalize it.
And how can they do that?
I guess send me an email. I don't have a website at this time. I do sell on eBay. I have a eBay store where I sell fanzines from like I probably have like 1,800 listings now, and I sell fanzines from basically every fandom that you could think of, and all the way from Slash to Gen, and everything in between. And my fanzine is on there, and you can order it from there. My username is Dr._Beth2000, and I can give you my email address too.
That would be good.
My email address is drbeth_David DAVID @yahoo.com. And if you actually just type in, well, that's just typical fanzine, and under Google, you'll find it. It'll take you to the link to eBay because I tried that too.
Very good.
And it's sold. I'm estimating around 100 copies so far over time, possibly more. Because
that's fantastic for a zine nowadays.
It is
amazing.
Very healthy sales.
Yeah. Plus it's a very specialized zine. It's it's Gen, Star Trek Gen, and Gen just doesn't sell as well as Slash does.
Yes. We like our smut.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like our love stories.
Yes. Yes.
So I promoted
our smutty love stories. I'm sorry.
Okay,
go ahead.
I'll give you that.
So I've been promoting it on Facebook, on Tumblr, on eBay, of course, on the various lists and groups that have all been around. And I also promoted at various different conventions. I'm going to be at KissCon, which is in about 2 weeks in Seattle, and I'll be at RevelCon and Escapade, which are going to be taking place. Escapade will be in Los Angeles in probably March, and then
February or March. Sure.
And then RevelCon is probably March or April, and that's in Texas. So I'll be bringing copies of both zines to RevelCon in Texas.
You say both. You didn't mention the new one.
I didn't mention the new one. Yes, I have.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you.
Sorry, I'm interrupting.
That's okay. That's all right. Now, you do have the new zine coming up, and what is that involving? That's also in the Beyond universe?
No, not entirely. Is one story in the Beyond universe. So that started taking place because after, the typical novel came out, that's what I'm calling it now for some reason, is I started writing missing scenes because it was like a spigot had opened and I couldn't stop it. So I started writing missing scenes for that novel, and I put some of these on fanfiction.net and AO3 as a way to draw people interested in and draw people into buying the fanzine. And it still is not available online. Only missing scenes and snippets are available online at this time. It's because I feel like I put a great deal of effort into this novel, and I didn't want to just put it online and then have it disappear, which is what I feel like happens sometimes.
That is what happens, yes.
Yeah. So what I did was I put it on. That's why I made the agreement with Annie, because she actually has so much experience with publishing, and she also goes to conventions as well, so she can help promote it, and then it gives it a little bit more validity than just a regular story online.
Does the zine have a title now?
Oh, the zine is called "Let Me Help," and what it is it started off as a Spock Hurt Comfort zine. And I think it mainly is a Spock Hurt Comfort, a Jen Hurt Comfort zine. Mm-hmm. So the reason is because I started writing these stories that were all that I wrote new stories. For example, I wrote one based on the episode, "The City on the Edge of Forever," and this was sort of a missing scene for "City on the Edge of Forever," but it was told from Spock's point of view. And I started writing it, and I started telling Alayne about it, and she was very intrigued by the idea of the story. And there's a lot of humor and fun in the story, as well as tragedy, and as we all know. And
yeah, it's from a point of view I'd actually never read before, and it just probably my favorite story of hers. Really like it.
The idea of the story was that Spock realizes that Kirk is falling in love, and that Kirk may not be able to cause the death of Edith, because he it's such a tragic thing for him. So what I did was I said, if Kirk can't do it, Spock is going to have to, and this will tear Spock up inside. And because Spock realizes that Kirk may not be able to put the mission above his personal feelings in this case. In the end, Kirk did, of course. And in my story, of course, he did. But this also combined another trope, I guess, is what I like to write, or wanted to write about, was where Spock was hurt on a planet where he had to hide the fact that he was an alien and could be exposed, and was trapped behind in this alien land, and he and Kirk had to go and find him, and had to hide the fact that he was an alien. Now, of course, in my story, Spock gets injured, and that's so he has to hide the fact that he's injured from the people on, just people in New York, and
right, exactly.
And it's at this point that Kirk realizes what Spock is going through, and what Spock would go through if they were forced to stay in New York, if the mission failed, basically.
Right.
So she gives me this idea, and
yeah, I was going to say, Alayne, let's involve you. What has been your participation in this?
Okay, I'm going to say this.
Go ahead.
Alayne has been everything. She comes over to my house and helps me with my zine collection, and she listens to me talk about my stories and gives a lot of feedback. She laughs in all the right places, and she's a great editor. And
yes, she is.
And so
she gave me this idea. Her story ends where I would start a TOS story. So I went to visit my niece for a week in Pennsylvania, and we took a drive up to Poconos. So I start thinking, what if Spock had to survive in the past on Earth? And I'm like, well, where would he hide? So I'm finding all these little old mining towns and stuff, and I've got this whole outline for a story, all because she wrote what she wrote. So she's got me writing chaos again, and she actually had me write. I don't think I've written a Jen story in decades, and I wrote a very short one, but I wrote one for this new zine for her.
Right.
She's very persuasive. She also took some of my art, and it's a healthy, very well thought out zine. It's some really interesting writers. I'm happy with it. Really happy with it.
Well, how far away are we from the print time?
It's
soon.
It's printed, as far as I know. Annie has printed it. So what we did was I basically convinced people to send me stories. I actually have 3-4 stories in it.
Yeah, you have about 3 or 4 stories.
Yeah, and I have a couple pieces of art, and she and Alayne contributed a story, and I convinced Sheree Cargill to write a story. She actually does a really good Spock Hurt Comfort as well. And then I put out an ad on Facebook saying I was looking for stories, and I actually went to
And you actually received some?
Yes.
Yeah, she did.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, that speaks to your reputation then.
Yeah,
Well,
people know who she is, that's
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And also I had Alayne backing me up, because I put out in the ad that I said that Alayne was going to be doing all the editing, and that it was going to be published by Ashton Press. And both of them have a very good reputation.
Yes. Yeah.
So because of that, I think they felt like more comfortable with sending these stories. So we have, what, 4 more stories that way? Maybe.
Yeah, I think you got 4 more. I've actually got it on my computer.
She has it on her computer. So I actually promoted the new zine quite a lot. I put it on Facebook. I put it on. I handed out flyers at every convention I was at. I talked to people. I said, "Hey, I know you're a Star Trek writer. Can you do this for me? Or do you have any old stories that you haven't published?" That was the thing, is they had to be not published anywhere else.
Right.
There's 11 stories in it, and some of them are very short, but that's a nice, healthy number of stories for a zine.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So I actually wrote, and I also asked the Laura Quiles, who did the art for my Well, That's Just Typical novel.
Yes.
I asked her if she would do another one for this zine, and she said yes. And so I sent her basically an idea that I had, and she went with it, and she made this beautiful cover. I don't know, have you seen the cover? Have you seen it, the flyer for the new cover?
I have not, no.
It's really pretty.
I have been out of commission for quite some time in terms of fandom, but I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to drop over to Annie's website and order both of them.
Okay.
Now, what is it? So Annie Wortham, obviously,
Yes.
is the publisher, and Alayne has been the editor.
Yes.
You've got 2 of the best people in fandom working on your zine. How can it not be perfect?
I'm real happy that Annie stepped in, because I don't really have a gen audience, so I wasn't sure if I could have sold the zine myself, because I don't reach the same the same type of reader as Annie does. So she's smart to go to her.
Psychic. You are psychic. That's the exact question I was going to answer, or ask you rather. And I also should preface all of what's coming after this by saying I am not on any pain medication, and my hip is killing me.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
I can't take any pain medication for another 2 weeks.
Ugh.
So I am, if I seem a bit dodgy, I'm more than like usual. I mean,
No, I understand.
okay. No, because I'm interrupting everyone, and it's awful. But anyway, so you have the art done, and it is in print now.
Yes. She said she printed out 18 copies. She has to hole punch it and bind it still, and then send it out to me. But she did all the proofreading and the I don't know, formatting for a zine. And you know, this is something I could possibly have learned how to do on my own, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to, and
she didn't wanna.
and it would have taken a lot of time and effort for me to do that. So having Annie do it, in addition to having her reputation on the zine, was really great. She's very professional when it comes to these kinds. I mean, in general, she's very professional.
Yes.
In terms of the fanzine production. And she's basically done, I've been in her fanzines multiple times, and she has an active website, and she has an active, she's very active in terms of being online and being approachable for this kind of stuff.
And I'm really not anymore. I don't go to many conventions, and I don't have a website anymore. And I basically sell just on eBay and through my email, because I'm not as active in fandom as I once was. So it's better that Annie take the wheel.
Right. Well, Annie, God bless her, has been a centerpiece in fandom for so many years.
Yeah.
And you know, as long as I have, and Alayne, and all us vintage fans.
I like that word.
Yeah. So
Well,
another thing about the cover is that when I first came up with the idea of the cover, I came up with the idea of this whole concept of "let me help," and what drew me to the idea the most was the Amok time, where and it's basically the one scene in Spock's room where Kirk comes to him and he says, "McCoy just told me you're going to die if we don't do something. Tell me what it is." And Spock, in this particular case, Spock really, really needs help desperately, but he doesn't. He's too embarrassed or too sick to ask for it, and Kirk really, really wants to help, but Spock isn't letting him. And that is the scene that was the idea for the cover. And I sent Laura Quiles a couple pictures, and she just went with it, and she made this absolutely beautiful cover. And then when I saw the cover, she sent it to me, an early version of it, and I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, I have to write a story around this now. I wasn't intending to write a story around that episode because it's such an iconic episode, just like City on the Edge of Forever is. But I just had to because of that cover, and I did. And the scene is just about how Kirk is feeling about this. What Kirk is trying to do, and also about how the entire, basically all the crew members are trying to get help as much as they can. It's what you don't see behind the scenes, and this is why I like Star Trek so much, is because of this intense relationship, and that's why I like her covered so much, is because of this type of scene. And I think that's why this this cover is so good for this this fanzine, because it's all about let me help, and that's basically that's why I had to write the story. The story is called "Let Me Help." It's the first story in the.
Rita, that's the essence of fandom. I think it's all about the relationships.
Yes.
And the interactions between the characters. And I think that's what all media viewing is about. And people can say that they like, and maybe they do collect, blueprints of the starships and things like that. But what it comes down to, what draws you in, is the foundation of these people and their relationships. And if I keep going on, I'll start quoting Galaxy Quest.
One of the best Star Trek episodes ever.
Absolutely. And closer to any con you've ever been to.
Oh, yeah.
If you've never been to one, yes. It's
laughed so hard when I saw it in the theater, I missed half the movie.
Yes.
Oh, I know. I did. I can still remember laughing so hard that I literally, and I mean that in the classic and true sense, spilled my popcorn.
Yeah, it was something else.
I kept pointing at the screen going, I know that person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My friends and I were laughing so hard and pointing things out to each other so much, we really did miss half the movie.
I have to watch it again.
We saw it. We had to go back and see it, because we missed so much.
And what's so sad about it, too, is that I forget who it was from the Next Gen cast that refused to go see it because they thought they were making fun.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was either, but I read somebody was offended by it, which is silly.
Yeah.
And of course it's really, the fans are the heroes in the film.
In the end, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful commentary on fans, who we are. And really, we're all fans. Everyone is a fan of something.
Yeah, that's true. Just some things are more acceptable than others.
Exactly. And, like the wonderful little story, I forget who it was who used to tell it, about the man who entered the elevator at a fan convention, and he had a huge hog on his head. And he was talking to the other fellow and says, "You here for this silly fan convention?" And he said, "Yes." And he says, "That's a damn silly thing for a grown man to be doing." And of course, there he was with his, probably
Yeah.
the Arkansas, whatever.
Yeah.
What is their team name? Anyway,
Yeah, the sports guy calling us silly.
Where they paint their
exactly.
faces and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
It's, everybody has their passion. And in fandom, we're just much more organized about it.
Yes, it's true. That's true.
We tend to be very either balanced brained or left brained people.
Yep.
I know a lot of people who are, in science because of Star Trek.
Sure.
As it's funny because once someone asked me, it's like, did you want to have sex with Spock? And it's like, no, I wanted to be Spock.
That's what so many of us say.
Yeah.
We wanted to be them.
Yes, exactly. And it's, it's sort of unfortunately, the women in fandom, it always goes to sexuality and what our role is. Guys, nobody asks them, do you want to blink Spock or Uhura or,
Yeah, especially with the chaos thing, men trying to explain it.
Yes.
There was Henry Jenkins wrote.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. I can't think of the title of the book, but it was a study on women in fandom, basically. I thought it was completely silly that a man was doing that, and the book itself was interesting, but I think he completely missed the point.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and there's some other people who've done the same thing, written theses and stuff, trying to explain Star Trek fandom and women writing the Slash thing particularly. And there's been women who've done it too, and I think just women understand it more because it's about us. And
yes,
there've never been that many men involved with it. We were talking about that earlier. There've been a few men throughout the years, but not many.
No, the majority of it's written by women.
For women.
Women.
Yeah, we're not writing for men.
Somebody once commented to me that, in fact, I had written the Brokeback Mountain novel.
Love it.
And bless you. And you're kind. And he said, I don't understand why. I don't know how you could take it upon yourself to write gay fiction. And I said, it's not gay fiction, it's Slash.
That's right, it's different.
It's a wholly different theme and topic. It's structured differently. It's meant for different readers. And certainly gay men are welcome to read Slash.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with that whatsoever. But it is written and read largely by and for women. And thankfully it's doing better than it ever has. I remember the time when Alayne and I used to have to hide it under the
table. Yeah. The boxes under the tables at the cons, absolutely.
And now we can sell exactly, and now we can sell it on the table.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mainly.
Yeah, no problem. It's everywhere. Everybody knows about it. The actors all know about it. The producers do. It's no big deal anymore. And I still have this underground mentality that makes me flinch. I do read online, but every time I hear it discussed, or an article in a newspaper, or somebody mentioning it casually within the structure of a TV show, like Supernatural did years back, yes. I freak out. I completely flinch. I freak out. I'm like, no. It's supposed to be underground. No, we're not. It's not in the light. It is not of the light. So stop shining the light.
Like, you know what annoyed the heck out of me with Sherlock BBC when they were doing the public reading of the fan fiction, and I wrote to the lady who's the producer. I guess she's married to Stephen Moffat. Mm-hmm. And I told her, I said, that was just incredibly inappropriate. And, it even, provided, I guess everyone knows that Sherlock BBC is gay.
Yes.
And that's and if you don't know that, I'm sorry.
You're not watching it right.
You're not watching it correctly. And go and look up, I can't think of her name, but there is an entire YouTube channel that is nothing but following the narrative lines so you can see it. But it even with it being gay, we're talking, they did not get the permission of those writers to read that. And even if they had, that is a private thing.
Yes.
And it does not belong to the public. So
anyway. You know how I got my pen name?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because one of my stories was read on national radio in Australia.
Yes.
I was using my real name, and I got a flood of letters because there was no internet at the time, telling me about this. And yeah, I took steps and became somebody else instantly. Because God, if that had happened here, I would have been in deep water at the time.
And that's also why I go by Dr. Beth in fandom. So anything attached to these fanzines and the stories that are online are all by Dr. Beth, although they are not slash.
No, but still, you know.
It's still, and there's such a chortling that happens with people.
Yeah.
When it's connected in any way to fandom, because it's an emotional thing, and they feel threatened by it, so they have to laugh at it.
Yes, that's exactly right, and belittle it, and
Exactly, and it's unfortunately that kind of thing happens all the time, and with this kind of open media that we have now, people feel totally in their right to do whatever they want to with material that's published online.
Yeah.
And to say nothing of piracies and that kind of thing. I had the odd experience of having, what is it called? I should research my past before I discuss it.
Probably a good idea.
One of the new channels, it's the same one that has the funny paranormal thing with Shane and Ryan. What is it called? BuzzFeed, thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
BuzzFeed did an odd thing where they discussed the vampire John Lennon.
Oh, good Lord.
Did you do the vampire John Lennon?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
It's fantastic. I love it.
I wrote the vampire John Lennon. And they didn't put it down at all. They just were sort of, nervously tittering, going, "You don't suppose this is based on reality, do you?"
Well,
well,
maybe something to it.
Yeah, Paul's writing a book.
Yes, he is. I can't wait to hear what he says.
I know. Well, we'll all learn about it, but yeah, I'm afraid. In fact, I must tell you, and this is promoting it for our audience, not next week, but the week after that. And if I'm in too much pain, it'll be the week after that. We're doing a Beatles / episode.
Oh, how fun.
And we're going to be joined by Alayne Gelfand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And a few other people
You are?
Including the writer of Vampire John Lennon.
Well, if it's the weekend of November 1st, I will be at KissCon.
That's all right. No, it's not going to be the 1st.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing I would like to say about Alayne is that she's actually an amazing artist.
Yes, she is.
And she actually, after I asked her, she contributed one really, really nice piece of Spock art to the zine. I don't think she doesn't think so, but I think it's wonderful.
I'm making faces. I admit it.
Yeah.
Oh, she always does that.
Yeah. And so she's an amazing artist. She's got a lot of art out there, and she's and if you want to if you want to support a starving artist, buy art from Alayne.
Yes, Alayne, actually, can you tell us how we get in touch with you for your work and your art and anything else involved?
Sure. Mainly just my email, which is my name, Alayne, at inetworld.net. So it's inetworld.net. And that's where you will find me. And any questions you have, any inquiries, anything, I am always there to answer and to the best I can. I also wanted to mention I have a new old zine. It's a new collection of old stories that reprint stories that I'm doing just for HISCON, and it's got stories that I wrote in the 80s, the 90s, and more recently from all kinds of publications. And these have never been duplicated anywhere. They're not online anywhere. So this is it's a reprint called Thunder and Lightning after the story I had in Legacy. So.
And she also heavily revised them.
I heavily revised them. I couldn't not.
I'm
going, oh my goodness.
I've done that myself. I know it's painful, especially my days of dealing with a 2 floppy disk computer with WordStar.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I only had hard copies of most of these, so they had to be retyped. And as I was typing them, I was correcting and expanding and fixing. And
yes,
one story I typed up was so bad I decided to leave it out of the zine. No, I can't publish that.
I can't believe there was anything you wrote that would be that bad.
Well, it was pretty sappy. Pretty sappy.
Well, sappiness, when we're young, that's our first stories are always the sappy ones.
Oh yeah, I first thing I ever wrote was a novel, a slash novel. Like I said before, I knew there was slash, and no one will ever read that. It is buried deeper than the deepest well because it's that bad.
I have a couple of those.
It served its purpose at the time. It was when I wasn't doing well, and it really took me out of my head. It gave me something else to think about, and I often say that Star Trek saved my life, and I honestly think it did. And
well, one of the things that I wanted to make the point of is that the Star Trek fanzine, the Let Me Help fanzine, is actually more like a work of art. It's not just a collection of stories. There are in it. There's art that Alayne did. In addition, I have several film clips from the original series that I've included throughout the fanzine, as well as I made a poster that sort of mimics the poster, The Many Emotions of Spock, that you see online, which is kind of a joke, where all the images of Spock are the same. What I did was I scoured my my selection of film clips for images of Spock in which the emotions, he shows emotions and the specific type of emotions that are on the poster. And I'm actually put this as a piece of art in the fanzine, as well as I'm selling it as a piece of art at the KissCon art show.
Oh, great.
So I should say I have a, shall we say, massive collection of original Star Trek film clips.
Massive. Very massive.
And I have started selling some of these film clips online a little bit because of the sheer number of film clips that I have. But a lot of them are behind the scenes or from missing scenes. And these are the most intriguing ones. And I'm trying to include some of these in first of all, in this fanzine. And I'm looking for other ways to sort of market them. Because I want fans to be able to see them because they're so really neat. I mean, we have one where Leonard Nimoy is actually making a face on the bridge of the Enterprise. And I've never seen this particular expression on his face ever.
No, it's obviously an outtake, but it's a really great catch. And I've been helping her sort them, and it's been very nostalgic.
Yeah.
To try and remember which episode and, what's this one pose from and what's that background and who was that guy who played? It's been fun.
Yeah.
Helping her do this.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about fandom. We're able to go back into our childhoods and in a sort of subjective, objective way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
re-experience all of those things. And that's the wonderful thing about outtakes is we get those shots that
Oh, there were some
weren't
great.
purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some really, really great ones. I have some from like Amok Time, and City on the Edge of Forever, which are like treasures now type thing, because you can actually see, get a little bit of a glimpse beyond what was actually shown on the screen. And this is, and the great thing about Alayne helping me is I don't have to explain anything to her.
No, in fact, I'm like, what episode was that where such and such and such and such? And she's like, oh, that was, so it's there's no learning curve here at all.
Yes.
We're right there.
Yeah. So she helps me with the fanzines as well, because I don't have to explain to her what slash is. And,
yeah.
But it is fun to see her blush when you talk too much about slash, though.
Yeah.
Married woman.
It's so sweet when they do that, isn't it?
It is.
But well, that's I think slash really is for older female fans. Even though we got swept up into it when we were younger, I think maybe that may not be true at all. But I just have this feeling it's a little more the province of those of us who are long in the tooth.
Well, there's certainly an obvious line between young new fans and the established fans.
Oh yeah,
it's quite shocking. I mean, on Tumblr, for some reason, they have started referring to KS as, and I can barely say the word, spurk.
oh God,
It sounds like something you don't want to do. It just sounds like something really bad you never want to do.
I've heard that term too.
It's horrible. And they refer to it. That's, did we lose her again? Are you still there?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. It sounded crackled again.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, so they have a whole other take on the relationship, and it's not crude, or there's not as much. I guess they see sex completely differently than my generation did, and it's so that shows up in their fiction, and you can just tell, not just by the writing style or the lack of ability or ability or whatever, but by the way they talk about the relationship. It's just so different, in some ways alien to me. It's been kind of a weird thing, me dealing with newer slash fans.
Yeah, and they don't spend a lot of time with editing.
No.
Seems like maybe some do, but the majority just seem to write it and put it out there without thought to things like grammar or story type or characterization. And it's the thing is, it's a lot to wade through when you're looking for stories. And that's one of the things that I was trying to be careful about this fanzine, is both in choosing which authors to ask to write. For one thing, the fanzine, Let Me Help, I was very careful in choosing and who I chose to accept as writers and the stories. We actually did look at the stories ahead of time and did edit the stories pretty heavily in some cases. Because we wanted to have really good quality stories, and we had really good quality authors submit the stories. And Alayne actually did a great deal of the work, talking to the authors and going back and forth with them with rewrites. And so the fanzine isn't just a collection of random stories. It is actually a carefully chosen collection, an edited collection of stories, as well as art. And the other point I wanted to make is that I'm actually doing a little bit of a giveaway. The first 15 people who order a fanzine from me will receive a film clip of either Spock or Kirk from an original film clip. And it will be pasted in the inside of the zine. And I can also sign the zine I can also sign the zine or autograph it, I guess. And Alayne can autograph her story as well. If we I'll have her autograph it as well. And we can personalize it. But as the giveaway, they can get an original Star Trek film clip.
Okay, can we get one more time how to go about ordering it from you?
They can actually contact me on Facebook. I'm going under my real name, actually under Dr. Beth on Facebook. I have a website, and also you can send me an email, DRBETH_DAVID as in David at yahoo.com. The cover price is going to be around $20, but that is not it's not official yet. It still may change based on Annie, but she said it's going to be probably around $20. It's 59,000 words, and it's going to be, I think, like 189 pages long. It's a digest.
Wow.
So it's actually a pretty long fanzine.
Yep.
And like I said, the first 15 people who send me or order one from me will get an original film clip of either Spock or Kirk.
Fantastic. You not only get a terrific edited fanzine, and that means so much. Trust me, having edited one, or two, or three, or several. And you'll also get a goodie on top of it.
Yes.
All right, ladies. Well, if anybody has trouble reaching Dr. Beth or Alayne, you can certainly find me over on Facebook. I'm Melody Clark. I'm under my own name. And you can also find us at the Facebook group for this podcast, Flak, Flak. Now, I think we'll wind things up because Spectrum is not being kind. I want to thank you both for joining me and apologize for all of the technical difficulties.
It's okay.
It's okay.
And
No big deal.
I hope to welcome you both back in the future.
I'd love to.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. To come, we'll welcome fan writer Susan Matthews to talk about the British science fiction show Blake 7. We'll talk more Dark Shadows with Grayson Hall biographer R.J. Jameson. Beatles Slash will be coming up with writers Gail Sweeney and Chanson de la Lune. Toward the end of the year, we'll welcome back Jonathan Frid's longtime friend Nancy Kersey, joined by Frid business partner and producer of The Young and the Restless, Mary O'Leary. They'll be here to answer your questions about Jonathan and maybe about the upcoming documentary on his life. We hope you'll join us.